My name is Ethan Cole. I am 29 years old, and for a while I thought I was the luckiest man in Portland, Oregon. My life before her was simple, maybe even a little boring, but it was mine. I managed a small, independent bookstore downtown, the kind with creaky wooden floors and the intoxicating smell of old paper and fresh coffee. It wasn't a job that would ever make me rich, but I was surrounded by stories all day, and that felt like a different kind of wealth. I had my small apartment in the Hawthorne district, my beat-up Subaru that was perfect for weekend trips to the coast, and a close circle of friends I'd known since college. Life was predictable. It was comfortable, but it was also lonely. I'm a romantic at heart, I always have been. I wanted to find that person, the one you read about in the books I sold, the one who makes the gray Portland skies feel like brilliant sunshine. I wanted a partner, a real connection, not just a series of awkward dates that fizzled out after a week. Then on a Tuesday so rainy and ordinary it felt like any other, Clara walked into my bookstore. She was like a character from a novel herself. She had this way of moving, confident and graceful, and a smile that could have melted the Cascade snow. She said she was looking for a first edition of a classic novel, something I knew we didn't have, but it started a conversation. We talked for over an hour, leaning against a shelf of poetry, about books, about life, about the feeling of being a little lost in the world. She told me she was a freelance writer with an English degree, that she worked from her beautiful apartment in the Pearl District. She talked about her struggles with depression, and she did it with a kind of raw honesty that I'd never encountered before. I found myself opening up too, talking about my own family's history with mental health. It felt like we had known each other for years, not minutes. That was the beginning. Our relationship didn't just walk, it sprinted. She was everything I had ever dreamed of. She was kind, showering me with thoughtful attention. If I mentioned I had a long day, she'd insist on picking me up from work in her sleek new car, saving me the crowded bus ride home. She'd have my favorite takeout waiting. She was generous, almost to a fault. A few weeks in, she told me she hated that we only saw each other on her side of town. My apartment, she said gently, was a little small. Why didn't I just start staying with her? Before I could even process it, she was clearing out drawers in her massive walk-in closet, making space for my clothes. She carved out a spot in her medicine cabinet for my toothbrush. It felt like a dream. Her apartment was incredible, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city lights. It was a world away from my cozy but cramped place. I started spending nearly every night there. She made me feel so welcome, so wanted. One day we were talking about getting in shape, and I mentioned I couldn't really afford a good gym membership. The very next day she presented me with a little black box. Inside was a key fob on a lanyard. It was a full year's access, paid in full, to one of the most exclusive gyms in the city, the one we had walked past just days before. She even set me up with her own primary care doctor when I told her I hadn't had a checkup in years because I didn't have a physician I trusted. She just made a call, and suddenly I had an appointment. Everything in my life was being upgraded, polished, perfected by her touch. I was falling, and I was falling hard. I told my friends I had met the one. I started dreaming of a future, of us officially moving in together, of building a life. The man she was, or the man I thought she was, didn't exist. He was a perfect, beautiful lie, a figment of my imagination that I had desperately wanted to be real. The real Clara was someone else entirely. She was a master of illusion, and I was her most captive audience. The problem was that this perfect world she built for me had cracks in it, tiny at first, but they were there. Sometimes she would disappear. I'd wake up in the morning and she'd be gone, her phone going straight to voicemail. She'd reappear a day or two later, looking exhausted, and blame it on her depression. She would say she needed space to battle her demons, and I, wanting to be the supportive partner, would accept it. I would hold her and tell her it was okay, that I understood. I didn't want to be the guy who couldn't handle her mental health struggles, but the disappearances became more frequent. The excuses for why she couldn't meet my friends were always last minute and dramatic. Her work as a freelance writer was a mystery. I never saw her typing, never saw her on a deadline. When I asked what she was working on, she was always vague, saying it was research or editing, and then she would change the subject. The truth started to unravel one thread at a time. The first thread was her work. One afternoon, I came home early from the bookstore to surprise her, and I found her in her office, but she wasn't writing. She was wearing a headset, staring intently at her computer screen, her fingers flying across a special keyboard. The screen was filled with orcs and wizards and glowing spells. She was playing World of Warcraft, the massive online role-playing game. When she saw me, she jumped and quickly closed the window, but I had seen it. She laughed it off, saying she was just taking a little break. But it happened again and again. I started to realize that her work days were spent lost in a digital fantasy world. The second thread was her money. The lavish gifts, the incredible apartment, the car, it didn't add up for a freelance writer who never seemed to be working. The breaking point came when I was helping her clean her office. A letter had fallen behind her desk. It was from a bank, addressed to her mother, but sent to this address. It was a statement for an account that paid her rent, her car payment, her credit card bills. Every single expense was covered. A little note at the bottom from her mother read, "Hope you're putting the allowance to good use, sweetie. Love, Mom." My blood ran cold. The successful, independent woman I admired was being completely funded by her mother. She didn't have a job. Her life was a performance, paid for by an allowance. The man I loved was an avoidant person who would ghost me without warning and then use her depression as a shield, expecting me to be endlessly understanding while she did whatever she wanted. The gifts weren't from her hard work, they were handouts. The apartment wasn't hers, it was her mother's investment property. I felt like a fool. I had rearranged my entire life for a fantasy. I had neglected my own apartment, my own friends, to live in her fabricated world. I tried to solve the problem. I tried to talk to her about it. I sat her down one evening and gently, carefully, asked about the letter, about the game, about the inconsistencies. I told her I loved her and that we could work through anything, but I needed honesty. It was a disaster. She turned it all on me. She accused me of snooping, of not trusting her. She said I was trying to control her. She brought up her depression again, saying the pressure from my questions was making her feel trapped, that I didn't understand how hard her life was. She packed a small bag and left, saying she needed space. That was her go-to move. Run away, ghost, and then come back when she thought I had learned my lesson. But this time was different. I wasn't just hurt, I was angry. I felt used. I was just a placeholder in her life, a convenient boyfriend-shaped accessory that she could show off and then put away when she was bored. I was the stable, loving guy who made her feel normal, but she didn't want the responsibility that came with a real relationship. She just wanted the freedom to escape whenever things got too real. This was my rock bottom. I was sitting alone in her mother's expensive apartment, surrounded by things that weren't ours, in a relationship that wasn't real with a woman who didn't exist. I looked around at the life she had curated, a life of absolute ease and zero responsibility, funded by mommy's money while she played video games all day. And I thought about my life. I worked hard. I paid my own bills. I dealt with my own problems. The injustice of it all started to boil inside me. She was going to walk away from this, just like she always did, and face no consequences. She would just find another guy to fill the space for a few months. But not this time. As I sat there, a cold, clear plan began to form in my mind. She had built her cozy, perfect life on a foundation of lies. I was going to destroy that foundation. I was going to do it in 3 moves, 3 fell swoops to bring her fantasy world crashing down into reality. The revenge wasn't just about hurting her. It was about reclaiming myself. It was about showing her that actions have consequences, especially when you build a relationship on deception and use someone's love as a tool for your own convenience. The first part of my plan targeted her access to something she used not just for herself, but as another form of currency. When she had set me up with her doctor, Dr. Miller, she had also told me about her prescription for stimulants. She claimed they were for her attention deficit disorder, helping her focus on her writing. I knew now that was a lie. I also knew from conversations we'd had that she would sometimes sell her extra pills to other people for cash, or give them away to seem generous and cool. She had even offered me one during a particularly stressful week at the bookstore. "It'll help you power through the inventory," she'd said with a wink. I had refused, but I never forgot the offer. Sharing a controlled, Class 1 substance is a huge violation of the trust between a doctor and a patient. So I picked up the phone and called Dr. Miller's office. I put on my most earnest, slightly naive voice. "Hi," I said to the nurse. "I'm a patient of Dr. Miller's, Ethan Cole. He saw me a few months ago. I was just calling with a quick question." My girlfriend, Clara Vance, is also a patient of his, and she gave me one of her stimulant pills the other day because I was feeling so overwhelmed with work. And I have to say, I noticed how happy and focused it made me feel. The relief was just incredible. I was wondering if Dr. Miller would consider writing a prescription for me as well. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was creating a clear, undeniable record that Clara was sharing her prescription. No doctor in their right mind would hear that and not immediately flag her file. It was a direct violation of the patient agreement for controlled substances. I wasn't just telling on her. I was using her own actions, her own carelessness, to sever her supply line. I could almost hear the nurse's pen scratching furiously on the other end of the line. She told me the doctor would be in touch. I knew he would be, but not with me. He'd be in touch with Clara, likely to tell her she was being cut off. Check, one pillar of her easy life was now a pile of dust. The second move was bigger, more personal, and far more damaging. It involved her family. Clara had a younger brother, Leo. Leo was an adult, but he struggled with some very severe psychiatric issues and was on a cocktail of heavy-duty medications to keep him stable. I had only met him a few times, but I liked him. He was a sweet, gentle soul who was clearly overshadowed by his sister. During one of her ghosting periods, Leo had called me, worried about his sister, and in our conversation he let something slip. He told me that Clara would sometimes give him her stimulants, telling him they would cheer him up. Worse, she would give him marijuana and alcohol, encouraging him to loosen up. This was incredibly dangerous, mixing unprescribed drugs and alcohol with his existing medications. And I knew from Clara that their mother, the family banker, was fiercely anti-drug. She was a super strict, old-school woman who hated marijuana with a passion and believed firmly in following doctors' orders to the letter. This was Clara's greatest vulnerability, her mother's approval, because with that approval came the money. I found Mrs. Vance's phone number from that bank statement I had found. My hand was shaking as I dialed. This felt different. This was involving family. But then I thought of Leo, and I thought of how Clara was playing with his health for her own amusement. My anger hardened into resolve. Mrs. Vance answered with a clipped professional hello. I took a deep breath. "Mrs. Vance, my name is Ethan Cole. I was your daughter Clara's boyfriend." I explained calmly and clearly what was happening. I told her that her daughter didn't have a job and spent her days playing video games. I told her that her generosity was enabling a life of lies. And then I delivered the final blow. I told her that Clara was giving her medically vulnerable son, Leo, unprescribed stimulants, marijuana, and alcohol, directly endangering his health. There was a dead silence on the other end of the phone. For a moment I thought she had hung up. Then I heard a sharp intake of breath. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was like ice. "Thank you for this information, Ethan. I will be dealing with this immediately." The call ended. I had just dropped a bomb into the heart of their family, and I knew the fallout would be catastrophic for Clara. Her supply of money, her free apartment, her entire fabricated lifestyle was now under direct threat from the one person who could take it all away. Check. The central pillar of her life was about to crumble. Clara returned a few days later, expecting me to have cooled off, ready to apologize and beg for her back. She walked in the door and I was packing my last box of books. The look on her face was pure shock. She hadn't expected this. She thought she was still in control. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm leaving, Clara," I said, not looking at her. "I'm getting my things and I'm leaving." This is where the third and final part of my plan came into play, the confrontation. "You can't just leave," she shouted, her composure finally breaking. "My things are here. We need to talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, my voice steady. "You lied to me about everything. Your job, your money, your life. This entire relationship was a lie. She tried to fight back, to gaslight me. She called me jealous, insecure. She said I was overreacting, but the words had no power anymore. I saw right through her. I packed my clothes, my toiletries, the few things I had brought into her world. When I was done, I had one box left. As I taped it up, my eyes landed on the gym lanyard hanging on a hook by the door. That key fob. That symbol of her fake generosity. "I'll be taking that too," I said, pointing to it. Suddenly, her anger focused on that one little piece of plastic. "No," she yelled. "You can't have that. I bought that for you. It was a gift." It was bizarre. Of all the things, she fought me on the gym membership. I think in her mind, if I left it, it meant she still had some hold over me, that her gift still meant something. But it wasn't a gift. It was a transaction. It was another prop in the play she was directing. "You didn't buy it, Clara," I said, my voice cold. "Your mother bought it, and I'm not leaving this apartment, which your mother also owns, until I have all of my things. And that includes the membership that was given to me." We stood there in a standoff for a full minute. Her, breathing heavily, her face a mask of rage and disbelief. Me, calm and resolute. I was not the loving, understanding man she had manipulated for months. I was someone else now. Finally, with a cry of frustration, she ripped the lanyard off the hook and threw it at my chest. I caught it, slipped it into my pocket, and picked up my last box. "Goodbye, Clara," I said, and I walked out the door without looking back. I never saw her again. I can't confirm for sure if her mother took back the apartment, but I have a pretty good imagination. I can picture the angry phone calls, the frozen bank accounts, the sudden, harsh arrival of real-world consequences. It feels good to imagine her world, so carefully constructed and comfortably numb, being ripped away. Not only did she lie about the role I would play in her life, but she used phrases like, "I love you," as casually as someone might say hello. She used my genuine feelings as a tool. Some people might think I took things too far, that I was cruel to involve her family. But why should she get to just walk away after masquerading as my partner? Why are there no consequences for spoiled, rotten people who do nothing all day while the rest of us have to wake up, go to work, and face the world honestly? Some might call it jealousy. And you know what? Maybe they're right. I am jealous. I'm jealous of the ease, the privilege, the utter lack of accountability. And I'm not sorry about what I did. I'm not sorry at all. My life is back to being simple now. I'm in my own apartment again. It feels a little empty sometimes, but it's real. It's mine. I go to work at the bookstore, I see my friends, I drive my old Subaru. A few weeks after I left, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was from Leo. It just said, "Thank you, things are different now, but better, I'm getting real help." That text was all the confirmation I needed. I didn't destroy a person, I destroyed a fantasy. And in doing so, I might have accidentally saved her brother. Last week, I decided to finally use the gym membership. As I walked in, I felt a strange sense of victory. I swiped the key fob Clara had thrown at me. The light turned green and the gate clicked open. It still worked. It was paid for a full year. It was the last remnant of her lie, a ghost of the life I thought I had. But now it's mine. I earned it. And as I started my workout, I felt the weight of the last few months begin to lift. It was the first day of the rest of my real, authentic life.